The sitting is open. Next item on our agenda is the debate on the progress report of the Bureau and the Standing Committee, which you find in document 1, 5, 6, 5, 8 and addendums 1, 2 and 3. This debate must conclude by 4:15 p.m. and I therefore will interrupt the list of speakers at around 4:10. I remind members that speaking time is limited to 3 minutes, and 3 minutes means 3 minutes. In the debate, I first call Mr. George Katrougalis to present the progress report on behalf of the Bureau. George, you have 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and allow me to express my warm congratulations for your re-election. It's going to be difficult to have a second mandate more successful than the first one, but I would like to wish you this too. So, the Bureau appointed me as rapporteur for this report, which covers the period from October practically to this day. It's going to be a very pedantic and futile exercise to refer to all that we have done at the Bureau. So I'm going to stick to the essential. The essential is that I think we have succeeded in responding to the basic challenge of this period, which is, of course, the Russian aggression, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, avoiding, however, the danger to become a monothematic assembly, because we have a duty towards the peoples of Europe to respect all fundamental values and rights covered by our statutes and the subsequent conventions. And of course, I consider our reaction to the Russian invasion not just as our response based on humanitarian reasons or out of solidarity to a nation state which is a member of our assembly, but also as an act of support to our fundamental values for peace, but also rule of law and justice. In this framework, on October 14, the Bureau approved the urgent procedure debate on, I quote, recent outrageous and inhuman activities of the Russian Federation, which then has been evolved to a report on political consequences of the Russian Federation's aggression against Ukraine. Then, on November, 24th of November, to be more exact, the Bureau decided to hold a debate on escalation in the Russian Federation's war of aggression against Ukraine. And this discussion has later been transformed to a report on the political consequences of the Russian Federation's aggression against Ukraine. And another, that was a report at the Political Affairs Committee, and then another one at the Committee on Legal Affairs regarding the legal and human rights aspects of the Russian Federation aggression against Ukraine. The second, let's say, big decision making of the Bureau was related to the fourth summit of heads of state and government. Exactly as the previous series of discussions, decisions and reports on Ukraine, that of course is a collective act of all the assembly, of all of us, but I think the Bureau has been very efficient in handling challenges related to a big event and also trying to synthesize different suggestions and proposals and trying also to make the Assembly at least as relevant as the Committee of Ministers. In addition, as I said before, we tried at the Bureau, as we tried at this Assembly, to avoid the danger of a monothematic institution. So we had a current affairs debate on military hostilities between Azerbaijan and Armenia. A sequel, one could say, of this debate, the current affairs debate, is the decision we have just recently taken at the morning to proceed with a debate on the humanitarian corridor there. And we did not stay just on events that they have a high geostrategic interest. We hold also a current affairs debate on the threatened bans of Pride events in Council of Europe member states, because it's obvious that we must have the same interest in protecting the values of our organization at all levels. Having said that, allow me also two remarks at a more personal level. I think that all that we have done at the Bureau, it is, of course, a collegial effort. But I must not limit myself by, again, explaining my deep appreciation to what Tini has managed to do, to synthesize different opinions, sometimes divergent enough, so as us, as an organization, to have a unanimous standing at the most crucial issue of the period, the Russian aggression. I think if one compares what we have done in comparison with the European Parliament, which is the only other analog institution to our own, he could find that we have reacted in a swifter way, more efficient way, and above all, a more, let's say, coherent and unanimous way. Finally, we must not allow ourselves not to face new challenges regarding other important cases of non-commitment with our values. I have in mind especially the reluctance of Turkey to execute by many ways the judgments of the European Court of Human Rights. The case of Kavala is the most eminent, but not the exclusive one. And I think we should remain to focus on what's happening in Ukraine, supporting our solidarity there, but trying to investigate if we can also promote perspectives for the peace there. Many thanks, dear Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rapporteur George, for your presentation of the progress report. We now start with the list of speakers. First, 5 speakers on behalf of the political groups. And first in the debate, I call Madam Petra Bayer from Austria, and she speaks on behalf of the group of Socialists, Greens, and Democrats. Petra, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Tina. Also, congratulations to your re-election. It really makes me happy. And it also makes me happy, and I'm sure you're aware that it is our first meeting where the new requirements, according to a quota, like it is written in our rules of procedure, are in force. And it really makes me very happy that all the 46 delegations fulfilled these requirements. That's great, and it's not only paper exercise that we are doing here, it's really an important step closer to representing our constituencies, to improve the quality of our politics, because if we involve people, men and women, elderly, younger ones, different genders and different abilities, then we really make politics that are close to people, and I think that's also very important for us. To mirror the societies is also then very important when it comes to the work in committees that are fed by the political groups. And thanks to all the leaders of the groups who made efforts to reach the goal of at least a third in all these 3 committees, the monitoring, the rules, and the judges committee. I want to remind you that it's really the task and the obligation of every single political groups to fulfill these requirements, not only the one of you. So good if we improve a little bit. Now we really scratched the 1/3. I think there is some space for in direction to the ceiling still, but it's important to have the legal basis to meet the requirements of the code of the procedures, and that's good. And we also, of course, have to look that when it comes to ad hoc committees for election observation, that there we also have a good gender balance. As a second point, let me shortly, briefly inform you about my role as General Rapporteur on combating hate and intolerance. You might know that there is a parliamentary no-hate alliance where everybody of you can become member of. You just have to tell your national secretariat that you would like to, and then you are a member. And maybe as a little asset, we will have a seminar in Vienna of the No Hate Parliamentary Alliance, a peer-to-peer seminar where we'll try to share best practices, how to combat racism, anti-Semitism, othering of people, and we'll know that it's still important to deal with these issues because racism is still on the rise. And so I really very much hope to welcome you as a member in the No Hate Parliamentary Assembly and that then maybe also in Vienna this May. Thank you very much.
Dank u zeer, Petra. Next in the debate, I call Alexander Pojce from Poland, and he speaks on behalf of the group of the EPP. Alexander, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. D'abord, je voudrais vous féliciter pour votre réélection. Il n'y a pas de doute que notre activité, notre vie, nos jours quotidiens, mais aussi nos droits sont affectés par l'agression en Ukraine. Devant un tel drame, où non seulement les droits humains sont annihilés, sans merci, mais les vies des milliers d'êtres humains, nous ne devrions pas rester sans réaction. Et nous sommes là pour aider, pour témoigner, pour faire la pression et pour aider l'Ukraine à résister à l'envahisseur. Nos décisions, nos résolutions, nos déplacements en Ukraine en sont le témoignage. La situation en Europe sans précédent a marqué sans doute notre organisation. La guerre, les attaques hybrides contre notre démocratie, les migrants organisés pour déstabiliser la situation dans plusieurs de nos pays ont créé les défis auxquels nous devons faire face. Et je crois que nous sortons de cette situation très difficile plutôt bien. Nous voulons répondre à ces défis en organisant le 4e sommet du Conseil de l'Europe qui doit se tenir à Reykjavik. Nous avons beaucoup d'espoir pour les résultats de ce sommet. Nous allons traiter un rapport à ce sujet aujourd'hui. J'espère que notre voix, la voix des parlementaires, émanant par le contenu de ces rapports, va être pris en considération. J'espère aussi que le gouvernement islandais va prendre aussi en considération l'expérience du 3e sommet qui s'est déroulé à Varsovie en 2005, où une vaste participation des représentants de la société civile était largement assurée. Nous ne devons pas non plus oublier la situation au Caucase et aux Balkans, et nous devons veiller à ce que cette situation ne tourne mal. Merci beaucoup.
Merci à vous, Alexander. Next in the debate, I call Mr. Julian Bulai from Romania. And Julian speaking on behalf of the ALDE group. Julian, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, President, and congratulations for your re-election. And on behalf of the ALDE group, I wish you good luck for the coming year. Dear colleagues, it soon will be an entire year since the war is raging in Europe, the assaulted country being a member of our Assembly. The war in Ukraine keeps making victims. It is still destroying not only the Ukrainian infrastructure and the lives of people, but also the decades-old peaceful development of Europe. This war, as any war, is an insult to humanity, and this reality shapes everything we are doing. On behalf of my group, I would like to underline the key points of the upcoming session. The shadows of destruction and armed conflicts risk spreading well beyond the current borders. activating frozen conflicts under the influence of warmongering from the part of nefarious political actors. We see how the tensions between Armenia and Azerbaijan is rising again, fueled by the same old geopolitical influences, and it is replicating thousands of kilometers away at the Kosovan-Serbian border. The European community, the international community has to continue the efforts in finding lasting solutions for these tensions that are menacing the continental peace. We also need to find ways and means to offer the necessary framework of support for the country most exposed to the risk of an expanding armed conflict, namely the Republic of Moldova. Council of Europe and the European Union should work together in finding the best guarantees for Moldova, its borders and sovereignty to continue its path towards social, economic and democratic development. In order to be a strong hand in protecting democracy and human rights on our continent, Council of Europe needs a deep reflection on its mission, and the Reykjavik summit in May this year will be the starting point of this process. We are looking forward to the debate on the excellent report prepared by our colleague Fiona O'Loughlin. Let me just underline the key areas where ALDE thinks Council of Europe could do more in order to be relevant. The International Tribunal, the new generation of human rights, above all the right to a healthy environment, and the very important proposal of a Commissioner for Democracy. I would very much like to thank our colleague Mr. Cilevic and Mr. Howell, who visited recently Osman Kavala in the Turkish prison, where he spent almost 6 years. European Court of Human Rights system is a very special tool that we have put in place in Europe to have more democratic security and the rule of law. And it is extremely important that all member states abide by these rules. Finally, on behalf of my group, I would like to draw attention of our Assembly to the growing number of political prisoners in Belarus and Russia. Maria Kolesnikova and Ales Belyatsky, Alexei Navalny and Vladimir Kara-Murza, and too many prisoners of conscience, fighters for freedom and democracy. We do need to work harder in order to support them and end the persecution that they are subject to. A general rapporteur for political prisoners could be a useful tool to keep this situation high on our agenda. On behalf of the ALDE group, I invite colleagues to support this proposal in the Legal Affairs Committee. Dear colleagues, Council of Europe we should agree at a crossroads in a unique historical moment when it needs and it has to reinvent itself so that it stays true to its mission in a meaningful, not formal way. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. Next in the debate, I call Mr. Zalt Nemeth from Hungary, and he speaks on behalf of the ECDA group. Zalt, you have the floor.
Thank you, President. I would like to congratulate to you and to all new office holders of this Assembly. I wish you a successful work to all of you in the coming year. I would like to congratulate also to all national delegations. We had not an easy challenge in front of us. We had to create appropriate gender balance in the organization. 1/3 of all national delegations are now ladies. And we have done it. I was doubtful about our ability to do this, but we have done it, so congratulations to all national delegations who have been able to fulfill this debated target. I do agree with all my colleagues who said that the fourth summit in front of us is a major challenge for the year. And I believe that our preparations for the fourth summit have been extremely important. I would rather say that the Parliamentary Assembly has been the driving force behind this fourth summit. And now, I think in the coming period, in the last phase of the preparations, we will have to make it a success story, and this will be not to a small extent on the shoulders of the Parliamentary Assembly and on us. We shouldn't forget that until now we have done quite a few important steps into this direction. Fiona O'Loughlin had a fantastic work, and congratulations to her. We should all remember that the war was the spark of the whole initiative, and we shouldn't forget that the Russian aggression cannot stay without consequences. Impunity is unacceptable in all ways, and I think our organization has a responsibility and a possibility in this regard. But also, for our organization, it is a unique opportunity to redefine our identity, who we are, why we are, what we do. And in the last 18 years, there was no such a similar opportunity like this fourth summit. And I think all the decided elements, for example, the environmental rights, just to mention one, is showing the right direction. And one other element I would like to mention finally is the cooperation between the Council of Europe and the European Union. We need to create a much closer cooperation if we are thinking about the future of the whole continent. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to make the fourth summit a success. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Zalt. And now I call on debate Mr. André Hunko from Germany, and André speaks on behalf of the UEL group. André,
ja,
you have the floor.
vielen Dank, Herr Präsident, auch im Namen der Linksfraktion. Herzlichen Glückwunsch zur Wahl. Das war auch wirklich eine herausragende Arbeit, denke ich, im letzten Jahr, die du, Tini, da geleistet hast. Ich stimme auch allem zu, was unser Berichterstatter George Katrougalos gesagt hat. Vielleicht ein Wort nochmal zum Krieg, den wir ja alle hier verurteilt haben, zum russischen Angriffskrieg. Ich glaube, wir müssen neben dieser klaren Verurteilung auch darüber mehr nachdenken, welche Möglichkeiten es gibt, diesen Krieg zu beenden. In meinem Land, in Deutschland, wünschen sich 75% der Menschen mehr diplomatische Initiativen. Ich glaube, darüber haben wir zu wenig diskutiert, und ich glaube, dass das dringend notwendig ist, weil sonst die Gefahr besteht, dass dieser Krieg einen jahrelangen Abnutzungskrieg und vielleicht zu einer weiteren Eskalation führt. Was den Gipfel in Reykjavik angeht, da ist vieles gesagt worden. Ich teile das, was auch Julian Bulay gesagt hat bezüglich Erweiterung der fundamentalen Rechte um Umweltrechte, um möglicherweise die Einrichtung eines Kommissars für Demokratie, weil wir in ein Demokratieproblem auch in einigen Staaten kommen, und natürlich den EU-Beitritt zur Europäischen Menschenrechtskonvention, der ja seit 2009 überfällig ist, seit 13 Jahren sozusagen, dass wir da endlich zu einem Abschluss kommen. Es ist eben auch angesprochen worden, die Möglichkeit der Einrichtung eines Art Berichterstatters oder Kommissars für politische Gefangene. Ich will vielleicht in dem Kontext daran erinnern, dass wir einen ganz zentralen politischen Gefangenen auf dem Boden der Europäischen Menschenrechtskonvention haben in Großbritannien, Julian Assange, der ja jetzt fast 4 Jahre in einer 8 Quadratmeter großen Zelle sitzt und auf seine Auslieferung in die USA wartet, weil er Kriegsverbrechen aufgedeckt hat, wo ihm 170 Jahre Gefängnis möglicherweise drohen. Und ich will daran erinnern, dass diese Versammlung im Januar 2020 sich der Einschätzung des Berichterstatters der UN, Nils Melzer, angeschlossen hat und der Forderung angeschlossen hat, Julian Assange sofort freizulassen und die Auslieferung zu verhindern. Auch die Menschenrechtskommissarin hat sich da in die Richtung ausgesprochen. Ich will darauf hinweisen, wir werden morgen ein Zeitevent auch dazu machen, zum Thema, wo die ganzen Anwälte auch da sein werden, um über die konkrete Situation zu sprechen, weil dieser Fall, wie gesagt, ist ja Basis der Menschenrechtskonvention, ist auf dem Mitgliedstaat der Menschenrechtskonvention, und er kann eben auch beim Europäischen Gerichtshof für Menschenrechte landen. Vielen Dank.
Danke sehr, André. Now I call on debate Mr. Ruben Rubinian from Armenia. You have the floor, Ruben.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, since Mr. Kaprougalos and some of the other speakers mentioned the Armenia-Azerbaijan issue, I'd like to update you on that. I won't talk about Nagorno-Karabakh itself because we will have a different debate on that, a separate debate, but I will update you on the relations between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Dear colleagues, during the last session, we held a debate after Azerbaijan attacked the sovereign territory of the Republic of Armenia, occupied some part of it, and bombed civilian infrastructure deep inside Armenian territory. Back then, during the debate, most of the speakers called on Azerbaijan to immediately withdraw its troops from the sovereign territory of Armenia. And now, a couple of months have passed, and unfortunately, I can't say that this has happened. Azerbaijan continues to occupy sovereign Armenian territory. And recently, the president of Azerbaijan, Mr. Aliyev, proudly said that Azerbaijan now has better positions which will be needed in the future, and that Azerbaijan reserves itself the right to strike objects both within Azerbaijan and outside of it, whether it will be needed. But this is not the most horrendous thing that Mr. Aliyev said. In an act of revisionism and warmongering, he said that half of Armenia is historic Azerbaijan, including the capital, Yerevan, and he called Armenia Western Azerbaijan. This term, this revisionist, irredentist term, Western Azerbaijan, has now entered official Azerbaijani language, and you know, it's an obvious intent to continue the aggression against the Republic of Armenia, and this shouldn't be acceptable. Dear colleagues, you all, better than no one, know that wars, aggressions, start with words, and you can easily recognize words which can potentially lead to aggression, to unlawful aggression. And I think this is the time that we should stop just talking about the aggressive state of Azerbaijan, but it is this time that we need a resolution on Azerbaijan, a state, the president of which openly talks about his plans to create aggression against its democratic neighbor. This shouldn't be acceptable for our organization. This should be acceptable for Europe, and I count on your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruben. Next speaker in our debate is our former president, Rick Daams from Belgium, and he speaks from Belgium. Rick, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not speaking on behalf of ALDE, I'm speaking on behalf of the Network on a Healthy Environment, which was established in January last year on the basis of the resolutions recommendations that we passed unanimously in 2021, where we asked to establish a protocol on the Convention of Human Rights and even also to have some legally binding instruments as others in the Social Charter. What I'm doing now is I'm trying to give some kind of a progress report, a sub-progress report to Kadrogalisis, because we believe in the network that all networks, all 5 of them, should on a regular basis inform the plenum. What do you do? Where do you stand? What are your targets? How far off your targets are you? And basically ask for support, but at the same hand, giving way to the fact that a parliamentary network is kind of a special forces unit into national parliaments. This is what we are. And so this is a very extremely important potential tool to bring issues from this House into the 46 houses nationally. So just a small report. We now have 55 members out of 30 countries. We even extended that to the national delegations leaders, which basically means that we cover all of the member states. Not all of them are active enough, but we're working on it. We basically already had 7 meetings with a number of results. We will have our 8th meeting on Wednesday. We will have our 9th meeting in Marrakesh, and the tool or the target is to have kind of a business plan, you know me, Mr. Chair, in the April session in order to hit hard and get towards results, because the April session is before the summit in Reykjavik. The point is that CDDH needs to make a legally binding tool. They're dragging their feet, so we need to go through the national parliaments and put the pressure to the governments where they are in all of their countries in order to push them to go to the summit and to agree through their heads of state that environment, yes, is a human right, whether it's through a protocol, whether it's through some other legally binding matter. But the network as such is the bottom-up tool that we can use in a proper way to indeed push governments in our national parliaments to do what we, in this case, in a unanimous way, have put on the table. So this is why I think it's very important. This is why we think from the network we should have a progress report on a regular basis here, not only to ask for your support, but to give you support, because we are developing tools for our members to use in their national parliaments. Just one example, we now have a kind of a resolution on environment and human rights. It's ready-made. It's like a copy-paste that each and every of our members can put on the table in their national parliaments, move on it. I hope this can go fast, because then in April we can indeed have kind of a business plan, and then on the summit this can come on the table. And let me end by congratulating you by your re-election and putting immediately the pressure on you, because we from the NEPCO, Mr. Chair, we expect you to put environment and human rights on the agenda and to push it through, and we thank you in advance.
I have heard the progress report, the sub-progress report of our former president, and I'm taking very well note of it. And I think it's our common obligation, because as you said, Rick, we have adopted this unanimously. So we have to show now that we stand for our decisions. Thank you very much. Next in the debate, I call Mr. Samet Seydov from Azerbaijan. Samet, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Actually, I was going to speak about the forthcoming summit of the member state leaders, but my Armenian colleague pulled me back again to the problem which we have. Unfortunately, information which Mr. Rubinyan just gave to our colleagues and friends absolutely out of agenda. 2 years ago, we brought justice to our territory. We liberated our lands from occupation. And I want to remind my respectable colleagues that half of Azerbaijan had been occupied by Armenia. 1 million refugees we had and we still have in Azerbaijan, and they have been waiting their homelands because my territories, which we just recently liberated, completely mined by Armenian military troops, and we are not able to return back. Just recently we lost again Azerbaijanis, and that's why this problem still exists. And on Thursday we are going to organize the side event about this terrible problem in this hemicycle. Please, I invite you all to take part in this side event. Unfortunately, Armenia is not able to understand that 2 years we have done a lot for peace. And in order to disrupt the peaceful negotiations, they just try to mislead the international community with so-called blockade of the Lachin corridor, with unwillingness of Azerbaijan, with some terrible things which had happened. Why? Because they're afraid. Afraid of what? They are losing the power. Power, because they promised to their own nation to restore the peace, and they are not able to fulfill their obligation in front of their own nation. They are not able to come together with Azerbaijanis to see it and to discuss the future of the region. And instead of that, they provoke those who are living in Karabakh. And now oligarch from Russia came to power in Karabakh, Mr. Vardanyan, you know very well this guy, the person who has been sanctioned by European Union, Council of Europe, United States of America, and they're afraid of him because this guy is coming to the power, not in Karabakh, no, in Armenia, and that's why they try to disrupt everything. My dear colleagues from Armenia, if you are looking for the peace, if you are thinking about the future of your nation, stop begging to international organizations. Enough. Everybody fed up of your begging. Just together with Azerbaijan, let's start to think about sustainable peace in the region. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Samet. Now, the last speaker in the debate will be Mr. Sergei Sobolia from Ukraine. Sergei, you have the floor. You should use another microphone, Sergei. That one.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank the work of Bureau and Standing Committee for all this period, and I think that our organization is a real forward organization, not only in Europe, but in the whole world. As well as we were first who excluded Russian Federation from all organs of the Council of Europe, but especially from the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. We were the first organization that, on previous session, do all in order to recognize the Russian Putin's regime as the terrorist regime. But I think we need now to move forward. Very important thing, not only on this session, it's not a theme of this session, it's a long period session for future special tribunal. It's the theme of private army, so-called Wagner private army in the Russian Federation. It's very similar to Nazis, fascist special troops of Heinrich Himmler that were organized for organizing of concentration camps, for ethnic cleanings. And I think that for our organization, it's very important just on our future reports to move this theme in order to recognize Wagner organization as the terrorist organization. Ukraine is not the last, but I think it must be the last for such private army. We remember the role of France and the French troops in Central African Republic, where they were excluded by Wagner troops. Then the role of Wagner organization in Libya, in Syria in previous period, now in Ukraine. And I think that it's very important to understand that all methods of organizing of concentration camps that were organized by Wagner troops, all their methods that they are doing now in Ukraine, and then where they have an excellent lessons on previous countries, I think it's the main danger now in order to understand that the future of war is now in the most dangerous stage. I think it's very important to understand that in future special tribunal that will be maybe in Nuremberg or maybe in Rublyovskaya Chaussee near Moscow, we need to recognize Putin, Prigozhin, and others from Russian Federation as the main organizers of new fascist regime in the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you, Sergei, and it's good to see you here together with so many colleagues from Ukraine, and stay safe and sound when you return after this week. I must now interrupt the list of speakers. The speeches of members on the speakers list who have been present during the debate but have not been able to speak may be given to the table office for publication in the official report. I remind colleagues that the texts are to be submitted in TypeScript electronically, if possible, no later than 4 hours after the list of speakers is interrupted. I now ask Mr. Katrougalis to reply. You have 3 minutes, George.
I won't exhaust this time. I understand that I'm speaking on behalf of the whole Bureau, not to express the political views of my group or my personal viewpoint. But I would like to stress the fact that all of you have witnessed that despite the very important political and ideological differences we have, we demonstrated, even in this discussion, the spirit of respect and full commitment to the values of this organization. And I think this is going to continue to the future. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, George. The debate is now closed. The Bureau has proposed references to committees for ratification by the Assembly. Is there any objection to the proposed references to committees? Do not see any, so they are approved. I now propose that the other decisions in the progress report, which you find in document 15658 and addendums 1, 2, and 3, be ratified. Are there any objections? That is not the case. The progress report is approved.
And then we continue, and the next item on the agenda is the debate on the report titled Addressing the Issue of Daesh Foreign Fighters and Their Families Returning from Syria and Other Countries to the Member States of the Council of Europe. It's document 15591, presented by Mr. Peter Omtzigt on behalf of the Committee on Legal Affairs and Human Rights. We shall now also hear an opinion from Mr. Stefan Schenak on behalf of the Committee on Social Affairs, Health and Sustainable Development. It's document 15672. In order to finish by 17:30, 5:30, I will interrupt the list of speakers about 5 p.m. to allow time for the reply and vote on the draft resolution and recommendations. I call Mr. Omtzigt, the rapporteur. You have 7 minutes now and 5 minutes at the end to reply to the debate. The floor is yours, Mr. Omtzigt.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. After the horrors of the Second World War, we founded this Council of Europe. We had two objectives: no more war and no large-scale war, and no genocide. We had a number of smaller wars, and now we have a large-scale war. And today we're discussing the issue of a genocide committed by thousands of Europeans in Syria and Iraq. That is a failure in what we sought to do. In 2017, we decided that Daesh had committed genocide and other serious crime under international law. We called for an effective prosecution of these crimes by national courts in Syria and Iraq, member states by the application of universal jurisdiction, or by international hybrid courts. Unfortunately, there hasn't been any progress over the last 5 years. There has been further evidence that Daesh committed genocide against, first and foremost, Yazidis, but also against Muslim minority groups like Shia Muslims and Christians. If we are to take the 1948 Genocide Convention seriously, we have to consider that thousands of citizens of our Council of Europe member states have taken part in genocide. And states haven't had the legal obligation to prevent and punish it. For instance, by impeding the flow of foreign terrorist fighters who joined Daesh in Syria and Iraq, and by effectively prosecuting them to deter further crimes. We should not just focus on lesser crimes like membership of a terrorist organization. Germany last year showed us how to do it and convicted a female member for genocide. At the same time, suspects must be punished in a fair way with a fair trial. Many Daesh fighters remain detained for years in camps and prisons in northeast Syria and Iraq. It's unlikely that they will receive a fair trial in compliance with international standards. And in Iraq, they risk a death penalty. This situation is counterproductive in terms of security, given the risk of further radicalization by Daesh and by the recurrence of prison outbreaks. That's why we state that there should be an international tribunal, given the international nature of crimes committed and the fact that these fighters come from all over the world. We reiterate to actually establish an international tribunal or a hybrid tribunal. And mind you, if we're now at the stage that we think we don't even punish genocide anymore, we're losing our credibility. As long as we haven't managed that, Member States should give priority to prosecution of Daesh foreign fighters by the national courts on the basis of active personality or universal jurisdiction. And we asked all countries what they did. And most prosecution take place only for terrorist-related offenses. That's why we ask you, please prosecute for war crimes and genocide. We make several recommendations in this regard. Do not forget female Daesh fighters. Use battlefield evidence and cooperate with UN investigative mechanism for collecting evidence. And use mutual legal assistance tools such as joint investigation teams. In any event, when these people come home, implement de-radicalization, rehabilitation, and reintegration measures for all returnees, especially when you talk about children. But these programs should never, I repeat, never be a substitute for prosecution and punishment. Finally, President, there are 3 points I would like to include in the resolution which go beyond prosecution as such, what we should insist on. First, more than 150,000 victims of Daesh, Yazidi, still live in camps, in dire circumstances without the possibility of safe returns to their homes. They seem to be the forgotten group. So as lots of countries focus on repatriating their members of Daesh, no one seems to care about these women and these children. And thousands of them are still missing. They may either be killed or be held in slavery in really appalling circumstances. We should help them. Secondly, Daesh fighters who are suspected of having taken part in the genocide pose a serious threat to European societies. There are different legitimate grounds, including national security and the prevention of crime, that should be taken into account if countries want to repatriate them. Article 8, the right to family life, is not absolute in the Convention. Last but not least, we should invite states to consider bringing proceedings under the Genocide Convention before the International Court of Justice in The Hague against those states which allegedly failed to prevent and punish acts of genocide. According to a report published by the Yazidi Justice Committee in July last year, there are reasonable grounds to conclude that Iraq, Syria, and Turkey failed to discharge one or more of their obligations under the Genocide Convention. I would like to thank my colleagues from the Social Affairs Committee for the suggestions contained in their opinion, and I've sought to accommodate amendments where it is compatible with our committee's main line of reasoning. And I would like to state here that I'm really impressed by the survivors I met over the last 10 years. They've been waiting patiently for 10 years. And they're looking at assemblies like ours, or parliaments like ours, to finally start doing some form of justice for what happened to their families. And if you want to, you can look at a few of the films which were put and sent to you before this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Omtzigt. You have now 3 minutes to the end to reply to the debate. I now call Mr. Schenak, Rapporteur of the Committee on Social Affairs, Health and Sustainable Development, to present the committee's opinion. It's document 15672, and you have 3 minutes, Mr. Schenak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, nearly exactly 3 years ago, I was standing at the exact same spot as your rapporteur on the urgent debate on international obligations concerning the repatriation of children from war and conflict zones. 3 years later, we are discussing once more the fate of thousands of children still stranded in horrible, inhumane conditions in squalid camps in Syria and Iraq. According to Human Rights Watch, nearly 43,000 men, women, and children of foreign origin linked to Daesh are still detained in Syria alone. What was changed in the last 3 years? On the positive side, and I'm really thankful about that, several European countries have made great efforts and have managed to repatriate their national children, often together with their mothers as primary caregivers. Many other children remain in this camp, and sadly, that a lot of children have died in those camps. Children should primarily be regarded as victims and should be blamed for the crime of their parents. There is not one child in the world who is responsible for their parents and the situation when they got life. At last in my Muttersprache. Ich bin kein Jurist. Ich brauche auch kein Jurist zu sein, um für Menschenrechte und Kinderrechte einzustehen. Aber ich glaube, es ist ganz, ganz wichtig, dass unsere Versammlung weder Rachegedanken noch juristische Spitzfindigkeit verliert. Kinder dürfen nicht für ihre Verbrechen der Eltern bestraft werden. Ich freue mich, dass Herr Omzig und ich heute Morgen einen Kompromiss gefunden haben, was die Abänderungsanträge geht. Wir sind beide nicht vollkommen glücklich. Das ist der Charakter eines Kompromisses. Aber ich bitte Sie, das Kompromissamendment Nummer 13 auch in der Weise zu unterstützen. Es geht, denn für die Kinder sollte nach 3 Jahren die Hölle genug sein. Und es ist noch einmal Zeit zu unterstreichen, holen wir die Kinder zurück. Danke.
Thank you, Mr. Schenak. And then we continue on the list of speakers on behalf of political groups. And in the debate, I call first Mr. Ivo Davor Stier from Croatia and representing EPP Group. Davor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and let me also thank Peter Omtzig for this report, as well as Stefan Schenner for preparing the opinion. As explained in the report, there is conclusive evidence that Daesh has committed genocidal acts against the Yazidis, as well as against Christians and non-Sunni Muslim minorities. This evidence has been collected and reported by the UN Commission of Inquiry on Syria, as well as the UN investigative team to promote accountability for crimes committed by Daesh. As the rapporteur has said, the Council of Europe was founded after the terrible experience of World War II with the aim to prevent future wars, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. Unfortunately, today we're again witnessing a war of aggression on European soil, that one launched by Putin's regime against Ukraine. This can only remind us of the original purpose of our organization and the obligation of our member states, and as Peter Omtzig rightly does in his report, by insisting on the prosecution of suspected Daesh fighters. In this sense, the European People's Party supports the recommendation to encourage all member states to participate in setting up a special international tribunal or a hybrid tribunal with jurisdiction over international crimes committed by Daesh foreign fighters. And pending the setting up of such a tribunal, to give priority to the prosecution by national courts, prioritizing, where possible, cumulative prosecution of Daesh foreign fighters for both terrorism-related offenses and international crimes as genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. At the same time, we also stress the importance of designing and implementing rehabilitation and reintegration strategies for returning Daesh fighters and their families. And with regards to foreign fighters' children, the best interest of the child should always be the guiding principle. Finally, let us not forget that at the center of all our efforts should be always the victims of Daesh in this case. And therefore, it's essential to support the Iraqi authorities, the UN and other organizations in locating the missing Daesh victims and ensuring the safe and voluntary return of survivors to their areas of origin. Once again, let me use these last seconds to thank Peter Omsig for his report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davor. And the next speaker is Mr. Rick Dames on behalf of ALDE and from Belgium. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our group has had a profound discussion regarding the prosecution of Daesh foreign fighters from Syria. Our group supports the establishment of a special international tribunal or hybrid tribunal with jurisdiction over international crimes committed by Daesh foreign fighters. Now, the report insists that a trial at home is essential because the prosecution in Syria or Iraq is currently not an adequate and human rights compliant solution, and there is a risk of further radicalization by Daesh in camps and the resurrection or the recurrence of prison breakouts, which may lead to an increase in the number of foreign fighters returning to Europe. The report points out that in some countries the public prosecutor insists on having trial in the country of origin. This would ensure, so they say, that they are effectively prosecuted and that there is a real follow-up during and after their detention. Part of our group is of a different opinion. Part of our group is of this opinion. So those who are of a different opinion feel that the report puts too much emphasis on the priority that should be given to the prosecution by the respective national courts of suspected Daesh fighters. Amongst other things, trial at home, so is their opinion, poses serious problems regarding the gathering of proof of the heinous crimes they committed and therefore influences the charges and influences a far too low potential sentence. Thus, one should not dismiss the establishment of hybrid tribunals within their national courts with assistance from international experts on the grounds that the Iraqi or Syrian authorities are not giving enough support. These two positions are not reconcilable. It's as simple as that. Another element we wish to, as a group, put forward is the fact that regarding the implementation and rehabilitation and reintegration strategies for all returning Daesh foreign fighters and their families, we insist that the focus should first and foremost be on the interest of the child, and not, as it is currently the case, the parents. The rights of the child prevail on other rights. We insist that our Assembly has a moral duty to ensure that innocent children do not pay to their parents' crimes. The proposed amendment, I believe there is a compromise, probably will be supported by all of our group. Finally, there is a problem of fighters that have a double nationality. Also, this gives little redemption towards the crimes committed against Yazidis, Christian and non-Sunni Muslim minorities. Many of these acts, such as enslavement, sexual slavery, rape, imprisonment, torture and murder, also amounted to war crimes and crimes against humanity, and we feel that this should be more explicitly in the report. As a result of these different opinions, we do congratulate the rapporteur on the report because it is an important one, but our members will vote accordingly to their opinion concerning the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dames. Now I call, but I do not see her on the place 208, Mrs. Olena Komenko from European Conservatives. She is in the plenary. No, I do not see. Then we go to Mr. Emmanuel Fernandez, United Left from France. The floor is yours.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Merci, mes chers collègues. Nous tenons à nous féliciter que le sujet du traitement des combattants étrangers de Daesh et leurs familles qui sont ressortissants de nos États membres soit enfin traité. Je tiens tout d'abord à saluer les forces armées kurdes pour leur contribution décisive dans la lutte concrète contre les forces de Daesh. Le courage et la détermination exemplaires de ces hommes et femmes nous obligent. Ils nous obligent à les défendre et à assurer leur sécurité. Mais ils nous obligent aussi à trouver une solution pour juger et condamner les membres de Daesh, aujourd'hui détenus dans les camps ou des prisons en Syrie et en Irak. Les conditions indignes de détention qui règnent doivent nous pousser à agir avec mesure et précision, mais sans tarder. Nous soutenons la demande d'incrimination des combattants de Daesh pour génocide et crimes contre l'humanité, en plus des accusations de crimes de guerre et de terrorisme. Il convient donc que l'ensemble des États membres déploient l'arsenal judiciaire qui convient pour répondre à ces crimes. Nous soutenons par ailleurs la demande de création d'un tribunal international pour juger ces crimes. En effet, ce conflit et ces crimes regardent l'ensemble des pays du monde, tant par la présence importante de combattants étrangers que par la nature même des crimes qui ont été commis. De plus, nous ne pouvons nous contenter de la situation actuelle et nous partageons de vives inquiétudes quant aux garanties qui doivent entourer les procès qui ont déjà lieu. Le droit à la défense et à un procès juste et équitable ne sont pas négociables, y compris pour les crimes les plus odieux, et nous rappelons également notre opposition ferme à la peine de mort. Dans l'hypothèse où la création d'un tribunal international pour juger ces crimes ne soit pas possible, il conviendra alors de tout faire pour mettre en place ces tribunaux hybrides. Cependant, le temps manque et le rapport souligne bien qu'il est intenable de faire perdurer encore des années le fonctionnement actuel des camps d'emprisonnement dans lesquels sont détenus les combattants de Daesh avec leurs familles et leurs enfants. Le peuple kurde a donné 12 000 vies pour défaire Daesh et maintenant nous ne pouvons nous résoudre à ce que Daesh puisse renaître au sein même de ces camps. Alors nos États membres doivent se résoudre à juger eux-mêmes leurs propres ressortissants. Et je conclus en abordant également la question des enfants. Par rapport au paragraphe 11 qui demandait la rupture automatique de l'ensemble des liens familiaux. En effet, alors que le rapporteur parlait très justement de la nécessité du travail de réinsertion pour les délinquants et criminels qui ne seraient pas condamnés à de longues peines, il nous semblait que cette demande y contrevenait, mais il me semble que nous pourrons aller dans le sens d'un compromis dans quelques minutes. Merci à vous.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez. And the next speaker on behalf of the Socialist Group is Forat Benchika from Belgium. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, congratulations to the rapporteur with his comprehensive report on the issue of Daesh foreigner fighters returning to the member states of this council. The report addresses several important issues linked to a complex topic. It's crucial that all member states take responsibility for their citizens, bring them to trial and punish them for the atrocity they committed abroad. The report proves extensively that we cannot leave these Daesh fighters with European citizenship in detention in Syria or Iraq. These countries don't have the means, or in the case of Iraq, not even the legal framework to punish those who committed heinous crimes against humanity, including enslavement, sexual slavery, rape, torture, and genocide. However, and this is stated clearly in the report, states have a general obligation under the 1948 United Nations Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide to prevent genocide. If we, the member states, are serious about this, we have to take a look in the mirror. We have to look at our own foreign policy regarding the Middle East in the past decades. We need to investigate why people are willing to leave their home countries behind to commit crimes in the name of an evil ideology. Therefore, it is essential that children of this criminal are repatriated to the European states of which they are citizens. Children should never pay the price of their parents' crimes. Every decision regarding separating children from their mother or primary caregivers should be taken with the best interest of the child in mind. We owe it to these children, who are victims too, who are the future generation of Europe, to reintegrate them in our society. This includes children who recently have reached adulthood and spent their formative years suffering under a criminal regime. We learn from this report that international terrorism is an enormous challenge to our legal system and puts a burden on our society. Therefore, let's not forget to invest in researching and tackling the root causes of terrorism and invest in pre-radicalization, not only in de-radicalization. This is the best investment in our shared European values and our safety. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Benchika. Then we continue on the speakers list, and the next speaker is Andrea Valeni from France and representing the Socialist Group. The floor is yours.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Aujourd'hui, en Irak et en Syrie, des enfants vivent dans des conditions atroces. Certains sont ressortissants européens, ils n'ont qu'un seul tort, celle d'être nés de parents djihadistes. Ces enfants vivent entourés de barbelés, sous des tentes, mal nourris. Ils subissent le froid extrême de l'hiver et les chaleurs écrasantes de l'été. Désœuvrés, livrés à eux-mêmes, témoins et otages de la cruauté de la vie dans les camps, ils peuvent à tout moment faire l'objet de prédations physiques et sexuelles. Sans soins ni nourriture digne de ce nom, sans école souvent, ni soutien psychologique, ils sont maltraités physiquement et psychiquement, parce que leurs parents ont fait le choix évidemment condamnable du djihadisme. Mais depuis quand, dans nos États de droit, punit-on des enfants pour les crimes de leurs parents? Je suis allé personnellement dans l'un de ces camps, en Irak, et j'ai interpellé au Sénat français à 2 reprises le gouvernement de mon pays pour que la France procède enfin au rapatriement de tous les enfants qu'elle laisse toujours dans ces camps sordides depuis maintenant 4 ans. Nombre d'États ont fait prévaloir la justice et la raison sur la vengeance. La crainte inavouable d'une opinion publique dont on suppose à tort qu'elle serait inaccessible à une mesure de justice et d'humanité ne doit pas nous détourner de nos valeurs humanistes fondamentales. Même si notre collègue Stéphane Skenak interprète d'une manière extensive l'arrêt de la CEDH du 14 septembre 2022, je souscris pleinement à son analyse, selon laquelle l'intérêt supérieur de l'enfant doit toujours être notre boussole. Il restera ensuite à traiter, bien sûr, la question des ressortissants européens majeurs, aujourd'hui détenus en Irak ou en Syrie. Je reste persuadé que, compte tenu des crimes qu'ils ont commis, ils devraient être jugés par une juridiction internationale. En tout état de cause, il faut recueillir et conserver l'ensemble des preuves et des témoignages relatifs à ces crimes. En 2021, la France et la Suède ont mis sur pied une équipe commune d'enquête en appui des procédures relatives aux principaux crimes internationaux commis par des combattants terroristes étrangers, notamment contre la population yézidi en Syrie et en Irak. De telles initiatives sont bien sûr à encourager. Je vous remercie.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vallini. And then we continue to Austria and Mr. Reinhold Lupatka, representing the EPP group.
Madam President, dear colleagues, thousands of individuals who acted in the name of Daesh perpetrated serious crimes under international law. There is conclusive evidence that Daesh has committed genocidal acts against members of Yazidi, Christians, and non-Sunni Muslims. Many of these acts, such as enslavement, sexual slavery, rape, imprisonment, torture, and murder, also amounted to war crimes and crimes against humanity. With the territorial defeat of Daesh in 2017, thousands of people of these terrorist groups, mostly women and children, stranded in crowded camps in Syria and in Iraq, with limited access to food and, of course, also limited access to medical care. The largest camps in the northeast Syria are Al-Hol and Al-Roj. I had the chance to visit these camps in December 2019, and I got direct information about the dire situation there and the security concerns which were mentioned already today. To address this FDF, foreign terrorist fighters, phenomenon, the UN Security Council adopted a series of resolutions where it established requirement for member states to develop and implement comprehensive and tailored prosecution, rehabilitation, and reintegration strategies for individuals. And in January 2020, the UN issued also a report on monitoring of nearly 1,000 trials held by Iraqi courts in the previous 2 years, resulting in conviction for crimes related to ISIL activities. These trials convicted also people under the age of 14, and moreover, the fairness of these decisions was questioned by UN officials. So the international response to the issue of foreign terrorist fighters, including repatriation and prosecution by their respective home countries, has been inadequate, of course. And this shifts also that the security risks elsewhere on a temporary basis and further amplifies a future terrorist threat. And because of the war in Ukraine and other big challenges like inflation and climate change, we have not put this issue on the priority list of our national parliaments. So it is very important that we have this report today on our agenda. Children are first and foremost victims and should not be held accountable for the acts of their parents.
Thank you, Mr. Lopatka. And then we continue to Hungary and Mrs. Monika Bartos from the European Conservatives. The floor is yours.
Chair, thank you for the floor. Dear colleagues, the member states of the Council of Europe contribute tens of thousands of soldiers to peacekeeping operations. My country, Hungary, participates with more than 1,000 people, soldiers, in peacemaking and peacekeeping missions in crisis zones. This is essential because local conflicts can easily escalate and lead to regional or global tensions. Crisis management is an important tool for prevention. But the prevention of terrorism and violent extremism requires a holistic approach, combining military operations and other related counter-terrorism activities, such as border controls and the fight against terrorist propaganda and funding, with a strong emphasis on providing humanitarian assistance. Humanitarian efforts contribute to pushing back terrorism first and foremost by improving livelihood and creating a secure environment, thereby eliminating factors which may lead to radicalization. Furthermore, this approach contributes to preventing illegal migration, which is often used by terrorists to expand their activities into other countries and spread their violent ideology. The UN Security Council adopted several resolutions calling on member states to increase the effectiveness of justice, prevention, detection, criminalization, and information sharing against foreign terrorist fighters. The resolution of the UN Security Council also called on the member states to repatriate their citizens. At the same time, it is important to state that foreign terrorist fighters are persons who travel to conflict zones to carry out terrorist acts. Returning foreign terrorist fighters pose a significant threat to peace and security of the country of origin, as the risk of these fighters committing terrorist acts again remain high. Actions against lone offenders who are disconnected from organizations present enormous challenges to the services. Since early 2021, Budapest has been hosting the Regional United Nations Office of Counterterrorism. Hungary supports the accountability of foreign terrorist fighters and also national and international programs focused on the reintegration of their families. In October 2022, the last meeting of the Foreign Terrorist Fighters Working Group of the Global Coalition Against Daesh was held in Budapest. So you can count on Hungary always against the fight against terrorism. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Mrs. Bartos. And the next speaker is Mr. Pierre Lafrides from Switzerland and the Socialist Group. And after him, I allow the speaker on behalf of the European Conservatives, Olena Komenko, to take the floor. But first is Mr. Frides. The floor is yours.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. On oublie vite dans notre monde qui devient un peu fou, et les horreurs qui se succèdent ont au fait de faire oublier, d'éclipser les horreurs précédentes. Et aujourd'hui, la guerre en Ukraine, avec les crimes odieux perpétrés par les forces russes et la milice Wagner, ont remplacé dans notre esprit les images effroyables qui faisaient le quotidien du temps de la toute-puissance de Daesh et de l'État islamique, voilà moins d'une dizaine d'années. Aujourd'hui, nombre d'anciens combattants de Daesh et leurs familles, des ressortissants de plusieurs pays européens, restent détenus en Syrie et en Irak dans des camps contrôlés par les forces kurdes. Cela concernerait des dizaines de milliers de personnes. Leurs conditions de détention sont très difficiles, voire indignes, et l'on doit penser surtout aux enfants embarqués dans cette galère, des victimes innocentes de la folie meurtrière de leurs parents. Les Kurdes souhaiteraient leur départ, mais la situation est complexe, la plupart des États étant opposés ou pour le moins réticents à l'idée de leur retour, des retours de toute manière difficiles, les combattants restants de Daesh rôdant dans les parages, et comme il faut théoriquement et pratiquement passer par la Turquie, cela complique encore les choses. La question du retour, en termes humanitaires, concerne en tout premier lieu les enfants et leurs mères dans nombre de cas, et nos différents pays n'en font pas assez à ce sujet. Pour preuve, ce samedi 21 janvier, j'ai vu et entendu sur France 24 que la France faisait l'objet de critiques de la part du Comité des Nations Unies sur la torture, car le pays ne prendrait pas les mesures nécessaires pour éviter des traitements inhumains et dégradants, je cite. En septembre dernier, c'est la CEDH qui avait critiqué la France pour son inaction dans ce dossier et le fait de ne pas étudier en profondeur les demandes de rapatriement. Je parle de la France juste à titre d'exemple, mais plein d'autres pays ont la même attitude et mon pays, la Suisse, ne fait pas exception. Le sujet est délicat, mais ce qui est certain, c'est que le statu quo n'est pas la solution. La situation politique là-bas reste instable. Les Kurdes sont la cible des États qui les entourent et ce qui reste de Daesh attaque régulièrement les lieux de détention pour libérer leurs adeptes et renforcer à nouveau leurs forces militaires. Des évasions sont possibles avec le risque de voir revenir, chez nous, des loups solitaires susceptibles de perpétrer de nouveaux attentats. Ces camps sont un lieu rêvé pour la radicalisation. Pensons aux enfants dans ce contexte. Pour les djihadistes européens qui sont ou seront jugés par les autorités locales, ce qui n'est pas, semble-t-il, la règle, la peine de mort est souvent prononcée. Cela contrevient à nos valeurs fondamentales. Il est certain que ces djihadistes doivent être jugés pour leurs crimes horribles. Crimes contre l'humanité, meurtres, décapitations, génocide contre les Yazidis, viols, asservissements. Mais ils doivent être jugés selon les règles du droit. L'idée d'un tribunal international est une proposition, mais les pays d'origine des djihadistes pourraient et devraient idéalement s'en charger. Les combattants de Daesh représentent l'horreur absolue, mais même face à leurs terribles exactions, il est essentiel que nos différentes démocraties appliquent à leurs ressortissants les règles exigeantes de l'état de droit.
Thank you, Mr. Frides. And then we go to the speaker on behalf of political groups, the European Conservatives, Uliana Gomenko from Ukraine.
Dear Mr. Rapporteur, dear members of the Assembly, on behalf of the European Conservative and Democratic Alliance Group, I would like to raise 2 points around bringing justice back. First is about the model to administer justice against Daesh foreign fighters. Struggle to decide on it erode trust to international cooperation efforts. I believe we have to narrow down our options towards international tribunal, leaving the options of the United Nations or the Common European Union with Council of Europe umbrella. Such a tribunal could have jurisdiction over Daesh members who have the nationality of member states, are detained in Iraq and or Syria and cannot face trial there in accordance with international human rights standards. Moreover, to avoid the European bias accusations, it may still have universal jurisdictions towards nationals of other countries for us the justice to be the main objective. This format would also provide that due process rights would be guaranteed in the charter to the new tribunal, which would exclude the death penalty as inconsistent with international human rights standards. We support the idea that pending the setting up of a tribunal, we should give priority to the prosecution of the national courts of suspected Daesh fighters and members who come within their jurisdiction or control on the basis of principle of active personality or universal jurisdiction, especially what comes to universal jurisdiction. Our state should not eventually become a cozy home for war criminals, no difference whether they committed crimes in Syria, Iraq, or Ukraine. Their return to their own countries, be it in Europe, be it anywhere else, should not be assumed as something that it is a logical chain of events. Not only do they pose a grave security risk upon returning, and is public opinion in these countries very much against them returning. This also takes away the chance of the countries and people who were victims to their crimes to see justice done on the shortest notice possible. On this background, the action of individual member states is very commendable, and we should perceive it as an example. They might provide a wider support to our other states to make us stronger collectively. Secondly, we should pay close attention towards preventing the spread of their activity globally. Vast efforts have been invested towards curbing the ability of such organizations to commit war crimes. This has to continue. We deem it essential to keep the strong position against exportation of war crimes and genocide. Foreign fighters and mercenaries are strong as ever before. For instance, Wagner Group, that became very important to the Russian military machinery and the brutal genocidal efforts in Ukraine, keeps undermining the right to self-determination and committing war crimes all over the world. In Central African Republic, Mali, Libya, Sudan, no name a few. If we could not prevent war criminals and genocide, then we must at least punish it. Unfortunately, justice is not inevitable. We are here to prove we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Komenko. And then we continue to Mrs. Boriana Åberg from Sweden and the EPP Group.
Colleagues, I'd like to thank Mr. Omsik for the excellent report. It clearly illustrates the importance of punishing the Daesh perpetrators for the abhorrent crimes they have committed: genocide, enslavement, murder, torture, rape, and sexual slavery of women and children. The report also shows the difficulties in prosecution of the committed crimes due to a lack of the necessary structures needed for an international court process. The situation seems insolvable, and there truly is not a silver bullet. To send these perpetrators to the European countries in which they have citizenship is not without complications. Some countries completely lack adequate legislation, and pursuing legal proceedings for gross violation of international law which have occurred in a different country is difficult, not the least for the victims and witnesses who lack the possibility to appear in court. In Sweden, preliminary investigations of Daesh women for crimes against humanity and war crimes have been dropped due to difficulties with the evidence. It's truly offensive that Daesh women are let free to take use of Swedish welfare while the survivors from their crimes remain in camps or makeshift shelters. Sweden has also been late with criminalization of torture, which means that a Daesh perpetrator who is brought back to Sweden and is responsible for torturing hundreds of individuals in Syria during 2018 is able to avoid criminal liability. If the act has occurred before an armed conflict in Syria is legally recognized, the crime cannot be classified as a war crime. The law criminalizing crimes against humanity became effective first in July 2014 and cannot be applied retroactively. It's worth remembering that Daesh is only defeated territorially, and many active cells remain, even in Europe, to bring back terrorists from the camps in Syria to later fail convicting them and allow them to roam freely is not only mockery against the victims of the crimes, but also a severe security risk. This is why member states need to intensify their efforts toward establishing of a special international tribunal or hybrid tribunal.
Thank you, Mrs. Åberg. And then we continue with Laszlo Torok-Sky from Hungary. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam President. There is no place for terrorists or terrorism in Europe. The only issue we can discuss is children's rights. First of all, we have to talk about the fact that the very idea of even raising the question of whether we want to allow terrorists back into our countries is absolutely crazy. Secondly, we need to talk about the fact that European countries, especially the left liberal politicians, are defending real terrorists and terrorist organizations, while at the same time they are easily labeling those who have nothing to do with terrorism with all kinds of offensive remarks. In this building, in this hemicycle, at the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, Mr. Paul Gavin did the same. He called my speech, in which I also spoke about the rights of tax-paying, law-abiding Europeans in relation to migration, a hate speech. Meanwhile, Mr. Gavin himself is protesting and fighting for the leader of a terrorist organization, the Kurdistan Workers' Party, which is based on communist ideology and is responsible for the deaths of thousands of people. In addition, many members and leaders of this Kurdish terrorist organization are free to live in the European Union. This is also unacceptable, as is allowing members of the Daesh, or the Islamic State terrorist organization, into Europe. It is almost impossible to understand why the leaders of the European Union have left our borders open, through which terrorists have already been able to enter our countries almost without any control. The perpetrators of the horrific, bloody terrorist attack in Paris, who killed more than 100 innocent people, were also allowed to cross the Hungarian-Serbian border freely. In 2015, members of the field police under my command captured a terrorist near the Hungarian-Serbian border, who later committed a terrorist attack in Würzburg, Germany, on the 18th of July in 2016. Because we were forced by European law to allow this terrorist to continue his journey. This is madness. This policy must end. Terrorists must not be allowed into Europe, either at border crossings with passports or illegally through open borders. So once again, the only issue we can discuss is children's rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Toroxkai. And then we continue with Lord Leslie Griffiths from the United Kingdom and the Socialist Group. The floor is yours.
Madam Chair and colleagues, I have listened to the debate very intently and have been alarmed by the repeated descriptions of the camps in which tens of thousands of people are simply left basically to rot. If we could think that Guantanamo was itself a denial of human rights, then it's not far removed from that to ask the same question about people who, without hope, without horizons, without perspectives, must face the rest of their lives, it seems, to being in these camps with the dreadful conditions that have been so well described by a number of people. It's obvious that something's got to be done. I don't want terrorists shipped into Europe, like the previous speaker mentioned, but I do want justice to be done. Now, even the Yazidis, against whom the most awful crimes have been committed, recognizing that an international tribunal will not be set up between now and tomorrow, are calling for the repatriation of the people who are in those camps, in order not that they roam freely anywhere, but that they face judgment in their country of origin. The United Kingdom has removed the citizenship of over 200 people in this category. I don't know what statelessness amounts to in the eyes and the hearts of a body like this. But somebody's got to give some thought to it, and it needs to be dealt with. And the one thing that's sure is that if we worry about bringing people from the camps into our different countries, terrorists walking freely in our lands, let it be certain that there where they are now, the day will come when the cross-fertilization of terrorist ideas will explode into an eruption of terrorism worse than any we've seen right now. So I'm very concerned that we have fine speeches made in this hemicycle, that we see an objective that we'd all like, but the practical steps to realize it seem so elusive and difficult to discover and define. My friends, I think that we've got to get a note of urgency into this debate. Surely not another 10 years are going to pass where we're asking the same questions and describing the same conditions in those dreadful camps. Please, let's inject this sense of urgency. Let's find a way through the maze of complications, and let's assure ourselves that next time we meet, something will have been done.
Thank you so much, Lord Griffiths. And the last speaker, before I interrupt the list, is Madame Isabel Maria, Portugal, from EPP.
Présidente, chers collègues, compte tenu de la menace permanente que représentent les combattants du Daesh, c'est vrai que ces enfants ont leur propre droit à la vie familiale consacrée à l'article 8 de la Convention, dont ils ne peuvent pas être privés en vertu des crimes de leurs parents. Les outils de lutte contre la menace permanente qui représentent les combattants du Daesh sont fondamentalement différents de ceux qui permettent à des enfants de se développer de façon harmonieuse pour devenir des adultes responsables participant à la vie en société. La sanction des actes de terrorisme n'est qu'une partie de la solution à apporter pour combattre efficacement l'obscurantisme de Daesh. Tous les enfants vivant dans la région et qui ont souffert des actes commis au nom du Daesh doivent être considérés comme des victimes de ce régime terroriste. La plupart des enfants enfermés dans les camps de Al-Hoj et Hoj étaient très jeunes au moment des faits. Ils nécessitent des soins et une attention tout particulière pour prendre un développement équilibré et paisible. Les enfants ne peuvent pas être jugés comme des membres ou des soutiens de Daesh. Eux aussi sont des victimes de Daesh. Même si certains sont entre-temps devenus de jeunes adultes, ils étaient des enfants au moment. Ils sont avant tout des victimes d'un régime criminel qui ne reconnaît pas l'attachement au bien-être de l'enfant. Il est nécessaire que ces enfants soient accueillis dans les meilleures conditions afin de permettre leur construction en respectant leurs besoins spécifiques. Cela fait très longtemps que ces enfants connaissent des conditions inhumaines et dégradantes. Il est urgent qu'ils rentrent au pays et que les auteurs et complices de ces crimes soient jugés, y compris par nos tribunaux et par nos juridictions. Merci.
Thank you so much. And then and I now must interrupt the list of speakers, and the speeches of members on the speakers list who have been present during the debate but have not been able to speak may be given to the table office for publication in the official report. I remind colleagues that typewritten text must be submitted electronically no later than 4 hours after the list of speakers is interrupted. I call Mr. Omsik, the rapporteur, to reply to the debate. You have 3 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, colleagues, and thanks for this debate, for not forgetting about what happened, because that, and our colleagues reminded of it, since Ukraine, we may tend to forget the thing that happened before. And we should not fall into that trap. If justice is not being done and seen to be done with the most heinous of crimes, genocide, then we lose credibility as an international community in other very serious crimes, but less serious than genocide. So I fully understand my British colleague, Lord Griffith, who says, let's not have this debate in 4 or 5 years' time again, because we were here in 2017. That means 2 things. It means that all of us go home after this debate and ask our governments to put some pressure on setting up this international tribunal, and at the same time push our own governments to start prosecuting those people who are there. And that's not happening, and I like to thank Ms. Aberg for being clear what happened in Sweden. She was just most clear, but it's happened in many countries. Fighters returned, were not prosecuted, could restart their lives, their children could not restart their lives, the Yazidis are living in camps, and thousands of people are missing. That's the opposite of justice being done and justice being seen to be done. Now, there is this issue of the children. And just to be able to allow countries that want to repatriate these children to repatriate them, you have to make sure that you read the second part of Article 8, which is the right to family life in the European Convention on Human Rights. There shall be no interference by a public authority with the exercise of this right, that's the right to family life, except such as in accordance with the law and is necessary in a democratic society in the interest of national security, public safety, or the economic well-being of the country. And it goes on about crime and other things. So that's why we chose exactly the text to refer back to Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights and the exceptions there. And we believe it's not always in the interest of the child to have a primary caregiver who has been involved in genocide. So that's where basically we're looking for. But let's take it on ourselves. If we only talk about it over here, we fail. And then we talk about it again in 5 years' time. So it's now up to us to make sure our own countries start doing it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Omtzigt. Does the chairpersons of the committee, Mr. Damien Cotier, wish to speak? You have 3 minutes, sir.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Dear colleagues, this report is based on a motion for a resolution tabled back in 2019. It deals with a very complex issue indeed, which raises serious security and humanitarian concerns for European states whose nationals traveled to Syria and to Iraq to join Daesh. We have seen that some of these states have repatriated nationals with their families from camps in the northeast of Syria. Other states are more reluctant to do so. The European Court of Human Rights delivered an important judgment on this topic last autumn. The Committee on Legal Affairs and Human Rights adopted the report unanimously last June, following a questionnaire sent to national parliaments and 2 hearings held with experts, including NGOs representing Yazidi victims of Daesh. The committee had a meeting this afternoon and supported actually the compromise, we will look at that later, that was found when it regards the amendments proposed by the Committee on Social Affairs. The report by Mr. Omtzigt focuses on the issue of prosecution of Daesh fighters for genocide and other international crimes. It follows the line of reasoning of previous peace resolution in 2016 and 17 prepared by our committee, where the Assembly recognized that Daesh had committed genocide. We ask now the Assembly to support again the idea of a special international tribunal to try Daesh foreign fighters as the best possible solution. In the meantime, the committee expresses the opinion that member states should prosecute their own nationals or other Daesh fighters who come within their jurisdiction, not only for terrorism, but more importantly, for genocide and other serious international crimes committed in Syria and in Iraq. I know that some of you and some of the countries represented here are reluctant to do so, also fearing that the indictment would be too low in regard with the crimes depending on the national legislation. This is why it is so important to look at the idea of an international court and also to look at the crime of genocide or other important international crimes committed in this context. Of course, the question of security of our citizens is of utmost importance, and has to be fully taken into consideration, which the rapporteur correctly and exactly says in paragraph 10 of the resolution. In the name of the committee, Madam President, I would like to conclude by thanking the rapporteur for his work, for producing what the committee sees as a balanced report on this very sensitive topic. And I would also like to thank the Secretariat for the great support they always give to our committee and its rapporteurs. Thank you.
Thank you. Good words. And thank you, Mr. Cotier. And the debate is closed. The Committee on Legal Affairs and Human Rights has presented a draft resolution, it's document 15591, to which 10 amendments have been tabled and a draft recommendation to which 3 amendments have been tabled. Amendment will be taken in the order in which they appear in the compendium. I remind you that speeches on amendments are limited to 30 seconds. We will start with consideration of the draft resolution and will then consider the draft recommendation. I understand that the chairpersons of the Committee on Legal Affairs and Human Rights wishes to propose to the Assembly that Amendment 13, 3, 5 and 9, which were unanimously approved by the committee, are unanimously accepted. However, 13 and 9 have consequently implications and will be discussed in the order in which they were laid. The chairperson wishes to propose to the Assembly that Amendment 3 and 5 to the draft resolution, which were unanimously approved by the committee, should be declared as agreed by the Assembly. Is it so, Mr. Cotier?
I can confirm, Madam President.
Yes, it is. Does anyone object? If so, please ask for the floor by raising your hand. I can see none. As there is no objection, I declare that the Amendment 3 and 5 to the draft resolution has been agreed. There is an objection, so the amendments will be taken in the order as on the compendium. Any amendment which has been rejected by the committee sized for report by a 2/3 majority of the votes cast shall not be put to the vote in plenary and shall be declared as definitively rejected unless 10 or more members of the Assembly object. I understand that the chairpersons of the committee wishes to propose to the Assembly that amendments 4, 8, 10, and 11 to the draft resolution, which were rejected by the committee with a 2/3 majority, be declared as rejected. Is it so, Mrs. Cotier? Yes, it's so. It's nodding. Does anyone object? No. As there is no objection, I declare that amendments 4, 8, 10, and 11 to the draft resolution are rejected. I remind the Assembly that the Yes, you put your hand. 257, say your name.
Max Lux, Germany.
Yes.
Yes, and I would like to keep Amendment 11.
You want to keep Amendment 11. I remind the Assembly that the objection must be supported by at least 10 members. So if you want to keep it, you need 9 more or even more. I cannot see. I see only you. 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's still less than 10. So, once again, so I do not do any mistake. Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Sorry. It's less than 10. So then I continue. Fewer than 10 members object, and so the amendments are rejected. I call the chair of the Committee on Social Affairs, Health and Sustainable Development to support Amendment 1. You have 30 seconds. the chair of the committee. No, Mr. Shenak. Yes? No.
I'm not the chair.
You're good enough.
Amendment number 1 and amendment number 2 are part of the compromise in amendment number 13. Both amendments was unanimously adopted in the social committee, so I cannot withdraw them officially, but I cannot support them. So please understand, amendment 1 and amendment 2 are now included in amendment 13 as a compromise.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? Mr. Omzicht?
I'd like to repeat the words of Mrs. Shenak. We reached a compromise text on number 13, and that's why we would like you to reject this amendment and accept Amendment 13. Now, we won't vote on Amendment 13 because it was voted on unanimously, but then we would have a consistent text, which also takes into account some of the points raised by Mr. Daams.
Thank you, Mr. Omzicht. What is the opinion of the committee on the amendment?
It's the same opinion, actually, Madam President. So the committee supported unanimously Amendment 13 and rejected amendment with a clear majority amendment number 1.
You're against amendment number 1. Okay. I shall now put the amendment to the vote, and the vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. And you see the result, and the amendment is rejected. Then we continue, and I call Mr. Schäfer to support Amendment 13. You have 30 seconds. Is this Mr. Shenak?
Yes.
Yes, not Mr. Shenak.
No, it was not read, so I was waiting.
Yeah.
This was, I think, we did it today in the morning, and it was not so easy for us because we have to move from both sides. For the social committee and the committee who is responsible for children's rights, it was important that there is not the sentence anymore, forfeit their right to family life. And I think this compromise, I stay behind this compromise, and I hope this compromise gets a big majority.
Thank you, Mr. Shenak. Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment? No, the compromise seems to be, in a way, obviously in favor also of the committee. Is obviously in favor. Mr. Cotier?
Yes, it is the case, actually, Madam President. It was actually supported unanimously by the committee. For procedural reasons, it was not possible before we have to vote on it because it was linked with other amendments, but it's a unanimous support from the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Cotier. I shall now put the amendment to the vote, and the vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. And you see amendment 13 is agreed to. Then we continue. I call the chair of the Committee on Social Affairs, Health and Sustainable Development to support amendment 2. You have 30 seconds. It's also still Mr. Shenak? Yeah.
See, you not forget that I was long time the chair of this committee, but now I'm only the rapporteur. But it's no problem. I always feel in a very positive to this wonderful committee. As I said before, that I cannot withdraw because it was unanimously adopted, but it's now a part of the compromise, and so I'm not supporting this amendment.
You are not supporting. So then, does anyone else wish to support this amendment? No. What's the opinion of the committee? I have to ask if you. I heard Senna speak against, so I do not repeat any more of that. So the committee, please, the chair of the committee.
Yes, the committee is against by a clear majority.
Thank you. The committee is against. I shall now put the amendment to the vote, and the vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. And amendment number 2 is rejected. Then we continue, and I call Mrs. Komenko to support Amendment 9, and you have 30 seconds. She's not here? Yes, you are.
Madam President,
Yes?
I think you were mentioning Amendment 8 because I was submitting
Amendment 9. I have Amendment 9, so... But I can ask otherwise. Does anyone,
Yes,
else wish
sorry.
to support this amendment?
Sorry, my apologies.
No, yes, you're welcome.
Yes. Besides the work of the law enforcement bodies, there are more actors who track atrocities in such cases, and these are the journalists and the media. Their role, as well as the role of social media, human rights activists, and ordinary citizens, is huge in collecting, preserving, and verifying open source information related to the war crimes. And this demand is in line with recently adopted Digital Services Act of the EU. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to support this amendment? No, I don't see. I have been informed that Mr. Omtzigt wishes to propose an oral sub-amendment as follows. And that's about to replace the words evidence of war crimes and human rights violations with evidence of genocide, war crimes, and other human rights violations. In my opinion, the oral sub-amendment is in order under our rules. However, do 10 or more members object to the oral sub-amendments being debated? No, I do not see. Fewer and not at all members object to the oral sub-amendment being debated. Therefore, I think it's Mr. Omtzigt to support his oral sub-amendment. You have 30 seconds.
It's a very useful amendment, but it left out one word, and that's evidence of genocide. So I propose to also, if we ask these online platforms, and it will be quite difficult to ask them, and if they preserve evidence, then they should not only preserve evidence of war crimes and other human rights violations, but also of genocide, because we determine that genocide happened there. So to insert the word genocide.
Thank you, Mr. Omtzigt. Does anyone wish to speak against the oral sub-amendment? No, I see none. What is the opinion of the mover of the main amendment? And then I go back to, I think I go back to Mrs. Komenko. What is your opinion?
I agree with Mr. Rapporteur. Thank you.
You agree to Mr. Omtzigt. And the committee is obviously in favor? Yes, of the amendment. I will now put the oral sub-amendment to the vote, and the vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. And the oral sub-amendment is agreed to. We will now consider the main amendment. Does anyone wish to speak against the amendment as presented from Mrs. Komenko? No, someone want to speak against the amendment? No. What is the opinion of the committee on the amendment as amended?
That's unanimous support the amendment as amended, Madam President.
Unanimously support. I shall now put Amendment 9 as amended to the vote, and the vote is open. And the vote is closed. I call for the result to be displayed. An amendment as amended is agreed to. I will now proceed to vote on the draft resolution contained in document 15591 as amended. A simple majority is required. The vote is open. And the vote is closed. And I call for the result to be displayed, and the draft resolution as amended in document 15591 is adopted. And I understand that the chairperson of the Committee on Legal Affairs and Human Rights wishes to propose to the Assembly that Amendment 6 to the draft recommendation, which was unanimously approved by the committee, should be declared as agreed by the Assembly. Is it so, Mr. Cotier? Yes, it is. Does anyone object? If so, please ask for the floor by raising your hand. I see none. As there is no objection, I declare that Amendment 6 to the draft resolution has been agreed. There is an objection, so the amendment will be taken. No, this is not right. Yeah. Any amendment which has been rejected by the committee decised for report by a two-thirds majority of the votes cast shall not be put to the vote in plenary and shall be declared as definitively rejected unless 10 or more members of the Assembly objects. I understand that the chairpersons of the committee wishes to propose to the Assembly that Amendment 7 to the draft resolution, which was rejected by the committee with a two-thirds majority, be declared as rejected. Is it so, Mr. Cotier? Yes? Yes, it is. Does anyone object? I see none. As there is no objection, I declare that Amendment 7 to the draft resolution are rejected. I call Mr. Aslan to support Amendment 12. You have 30 seconds. Mr. Cotier?
I'm sorry, I misunderstood you, Madam Chair. Madam President, the Amendment 12 was also rejected by the committee by a two-thirds majority. 16-7, actually, it's a two-thirds majority.
It's also rejected by the committee, so then I have to ask if someone wants to keep it. Yes, 52.
Thank you, dear,
Say your name.
President. Mrs. Arslan, I would like to support amendment number 12. I want to vote.
Yeah, you need 9 more people. So if I see 9 more people to keep this Amendment 12, I see 1, 2. Can you stand up so it's easier to count you? Yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. That's more than 10. Yes. So we have to vote about it. That's okay. Does anyone want to? You have supported it. We know the position of the committee, but Mrs. Aslan, you want to move it. So then the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sehr geehrte Kolleginnen und Kollegen, ich möchte mich für diesen Bericht bedanken und ich möchte nur ergänzen, dass es wichtig ist, dass wir sicherstellen, dass Kinder ihre Staatsangehörigkeit nicht verlieren dürfen. Sie sind, wie das mehrfach erwähnt worden ist, Opfer und sie sind nicht Täter. Und es ist auch wichtig, dass wir in Strafjustiz das Kindeswohl ins Zentrum stellen. Das heißt, dieser Vorschlag geht dahin, dass wir die Interessen der Kinder vertreten. Bitte unterstützen Sie diesen Antrag. Merci.
Thank you so much. Does anyone want to speak against? And that's Mr. Omsik, you want to speak against. The floor is yours.
The objection is not against that the children should not lose the nationality of their state. That would not be a problem. They should keep their nationality. You shouldn't deprive children which have a Dutch or a Swedish or a German nationality and live in those camps from that nationality. The problem is the line afterwards. They may return with at least one of their parents. And if they have one parent, and if it's in the interest, and that's what we said earlier in the resolution, in the interest of the child not to return with their parent, because it's better for the child, or it's better for national security, then in that case, there shouldn't be the absolute right. Of course, if a state chooses that it's possible, it can, but that should not be an absolute right, and that's why I would ask you to reject this particular amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Omsikt, and the committee was also against, as we heard Mr. Cotier, the chairperson of the committee, and I will now put the amendment to the vote, Amendment 12. The vote is open. And the vote is closed, and I call for the result to be displayed. Yes, the amendment is agreed to. We will now proceed to vote on the draft recommendation contained in document 15/591 as amended. A two-thirds majority is required, and the vote is open. The vote is closed, and I call for the result to be displayed, and the draft recommendation in document 15/591 is adopted. The Assembly will hold its next public sitting tomorrow at 10 a.m. with the agenda which was approved this morning, and the sitting is adjourned.
A special